Okay guys, so we are back for another review of how to make a line graph and how to read a line graph. Today I just made up the data question because I wanted to come up with a question that was kind of easy to understand. So the data question that we're going to use today is how many cupcakes were sold at the bakery from January to May 2020. So these are all going to be made up numbers because I'm just making it up in my head from like a random bakery, but we actually could go to a bakery like Georgetown Cupcake or Baked and Wired. Both of those are cupcake bakeries in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. But I didn't want to take real numbers from a bakery, I just wanted to make them up so that I could show you change over time in a graph. All right, so here's our data chart. It says number of cupcakes sold per month, and I have the months written out: January, February, March, April, and May. So let's say in January they sold 250 cupcakes. In February they sold 400 cupcakes because of Valentine's Day. In March, they sold 350 cupcakes. In April, because we were all stuck inside, they only sold 100 cupcakes. And in May, they sold 150 cupcakes. Okay, so now we have our data. We have our number of cupcakes sold per month. In January, there was 250 sold. In February, there was 400 sold. In March, there was 300 sold. In April, there was 100 sold. And in May, there was 150 sold. So we can see that our data does not go below the number 100. So when we are making our data chart, when we're making our graph, we're not going to have our numbers go below 100. That wouldn't make any sense. I'm going to show you how we're going to do it. So here is our data chart. Along the x-axis, this time we're going to put our months. And because we only have 5 categories, January, February, March, April, and May, I spaced them out a little bit on the graph to give us some more room and to show the change over time more dramatically on the graph. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So along the x-axis, we have our months, and you can see I labeled it down here, month. What we need to do is make our title. It's going to be number of cupcakes sold per month in 2020. Now we've only had 5 months so far, so we're not going to have all of the months of 2020 represented quite yet. We're going to put our title right here and keep our star for when we want to answer some data questions at the end. So here's our title, number of cupcakes sold per month in 2020. Of course, along the y-axis, we're going to put our numbers, and our title for our y-axis going up and down is going to be number of cupcakes sold. Because our data points do not go below 100, we're going to start at 0 but then have that weird jump again and then go straight to 50. Actually, we're going to go ahead and start at 100 because, like I said, our data points don't go below that number. And we're going to go up by intervals of 50. So 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400. Okay, so now that we have our numbers written along the y-axis, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, and 400, remember we have this weird jump because our data points do not go below 100. We are going to transfer over our data from our data chart after we have labeled all of the parts of our graph, which we have. We've labeled our y-axis, our x-axis, and we have a title for our graph. Just like yesterday, we are going to use our little red dots to make our data points. Let's go back to our data chart and see how many cupcakes were sold in January. So, in January, how many cupcakes were sold? If you said 250, you're exactly right. So we're going to go down to January, follow right up to 250, and put our data point. Now to February, how many cupcakes were sold in February? If you said 400, you're exactly right. We're going to put our data point in February, lining up with 400. In March, 350 cupcakes were sold. So we're going to put our data point for March, lining up with 350. In April, 100 cupcakes were sold. So we're going to put our data point for April, lining up with 100. And in May, 150 cupcakes were sold. So we are going to line up our data point for May with 150. Okay, now we have our random dots on our chart or our graph. We need to make our lines connecting those dots. And remember, when you connect them, you want to make those lines go right in the middle of your data points. Now we have our beautiful line graph, and you can see how the sales of cupcakes really dramatically went up and then way down in April when people started to stay at home. Now remember, I just made these up, but it's just something easy for us to keep track of as an example for how sales can change over time. So as you can see, the highest point on our graph is here and the lowest point is here. Now tomorrow we're going to answer some questions about this line graph that we made, so I'm not going to answer those now, but think about some questions that we might be able to answer using this graph called number of cupcakes sold per month in 2020. Thanks for making this line graph with me, and I'll see you soon.